Hi guys, today I'm doing a video about sig figs. Now with sig figs, there are two rules that you have to keep in mind. Rule number one is leading zeros never count, and rule number two is trailing zeros never count unless there's a decimal point. So let me just do some examples for you guys to make sure that you guys get what it's saying when we say leading zeros never count. Okay, so with leading zeros never count is we don't count these two zeros. Actually, this zero doesn't mean anything at all, but this zero in particular we don't count. So how many sig figs do you think we're going to have in this example? So if the leading zeros don't count, there's only one number, which is the 2, so we're going to have one sig fig. What about over here? Leading zeros don't count. So look at all these zeros. They're in front, and how many sig figs do we have in total? We're going to have 2 sig figs. What about this one? So it's 0.070009. So these for sure are in front, but what about these right here? These are actually in between two significant digits, so we're going to count them in the final answer. So in the final answer, how many sig figs are we going to have? 5. Now, rule number 2 is trailing zeros never count unless there's a decimal point. So over here, let's look at 7,400. How many sig figs? Look at the 2 zeros at the end. There's no decimal point, and those are trailing zeros. So how many sig figs will there be? 2. Let's look at 300. How many trailing zeros? There's 2 trailing zeros and no decimal point, so 1 sig fig. And how many sig figs will be on the third problem? So there's 2 trailing zeros, so all of this right here is going to count. So 4 sig figs. Now here are just some practice problems. So how many sig figs are each of these going to have? So 12 is going to have 2. 240, that's going to have 2 as well. 0.0024, these don't count, so it's going to have 2. What about 0.240? So right here, I said that it was 2 sig figs. Right here, there's a 0 at the end, and there's a decimal point. So the trailing zeros do count if there's a decimal point, which is right over here. So this is going to have 3 sig figs. 281, 3, 2,700, 2. Now let's look at the last one. So how many sig figs? So leading zeros don't count, and trailing zeros don't count, but there's a decimal point. So we're going to count all these right here, and that's going to be 5 sig figs. So another thing to do with sig figs is they might tell you to round it to a certain number. So let's round each of these to 3 sig figs, and that's going to be 286, because that's 3 sig figs. Right here in the beginning was 4. Right here, let's make 700 into 3 sig figs. So 700 is 1 sig fig normally, but we're just going to make it 3 sig figs. So how we can do that is we could do 700 decimal point. So with this decimal point, it's making sure that all the trailing zeros do count. Okay, so now let's do 8,400. Now this one is a little bit tougher because you can't just put a decimal point at the end, or else you'll have 4 sig figs. So what do? So there's 2 ways of doing this. One is 8,400 and put a dash right here to show that that 0 is significant. Or, which I usually do, is I convert it to scientific notation, which I put 8.40 times 10 to the third. So notice in scientific notation, I didn't put 8.4, I put 8.40. So every single number I put in scientific notation does count as a significant digit. And this 10 to the third, this does not count when it goes to sig figs. Okay, final example is 2,454. Make that into 3 sig figs. So we need these 3 to be significant. So this one is going to round down. So we are going to have 2,450.